And we are live. Hi, everyone. I am Sonia from WorkSafe Tasmania, and I will be your moderator today. This session is UV in the Workplace, presented by Ella French from Cancer Council Tasmania. In recognition of the deep history and culture of this island, we acknowledge Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the original and continuing custodians of the land, sea, and sky. We acknowledge and pay our respects to all Tasmanian Aboriginal people, all of whom have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture, and Aboriginal rights. Now, please take a moment to read the following slide about information you'll receive today. Please use the chat tab towards the right-hand side to type any questions you may have. Those questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. Only presenter webcams will be used. Today's presentation is also being recorded and will be available on WorkSafe Tasmania's YouTube channel towards the end of the month. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce your presenter, Ella French from Cancer Council Tasmania. Ella is a cancer prevention project officer and has worked at the Cancer Council Tasmania for almost 10 years and is passionate about health, well-being, and engaging the community in positive health behaviors. Welcome, Ella. Over to you.
Thank you so much. We were just joking before that I put September 2024 as the year on here. So isn't that a great start? I'm glad we're all here at the same time, the same year today. So thank you so much. Yes, I'll be delivering on UV in the workplace today. And thank you so much for everyone to come along and for your interest in learning about this. And just to start with, I thought we'll just talk a little bit about Cancer Council Tasmania for those of you who don't know a bit about us. So we are a not-for-profit organisation and we work to reduce the impact and incidence of all cancers on all Tasmanians. And we do this by providing support for those people who are affected by cancer. So that might be if you're impacted directly by a cancer diagnosis or if it's a family friend around you that's been impacted. Prevention is the team that I'm in. So we work to educate people on how you can reduce your risk of cancer. And we also provide research is the third thing we do. So we put money into researchers here in Tasmania to find out more about cancer. And so we actually pretty much all of our funding actually comes from events and donations from the community. And everything that we raise here stays here in Tasmania. So unfortunately, 11 people are diagnosed with cancer every single day here in Tasmania, which is a lot, and is essentially, why we do what we do. We want to support people with a cancer diagnosis. And there's many things that we don't know about cancer and the causes of cancer. However, we do know that around a third of cancers can be prevented, which is what I do in my role. So around educating people on how you can reduce your risk of cancer. So 11 Tasmanians is quite a lot. And just want to acknowledge that that means that probably a lot of you attending today have possibly been impacted by cancer. So if you need to take time away and then come back to webinar, feel free to. But I won't be giving sort of any sort of medical or clinical advice today. It's more just general awareness. So just going through a little bit about what we'll talk about today. So I'll be talking about UV radiation and what is UV and UV versus heat, which is particularly important here in Tasmania, and I'll chat about that soon. About sun protection policy, if you have one in your workplace and how I can assist you with that. What are the sun protection measures, and also where to go to for more information and support after this session. So we do have a vision that all employers and employees in the workplace understand the risks associated with UV and that strategies are put in place to protect workers so that everyone can go home safe and healthy at the end of every day. So we really wish that upon employers and employees in the workplace. Um, and I guess this presentation will hopefully address that and how people can achieve this mission in the workplace. So we know that outdoor workers receive around 5 to 10 times more UV exposure than indoor workers. We also know that around 200 melanomas and 34,000 non-melanoma skin cancers per year are due to occupational exposure in the workplace. So this is why it's so important to, I guess, be aware and learn about UV and the risk associated and how to protect yourself. So, what is UV radiation? And I think we're going to have a few polls today. I'm not sure if they've be coming up soon, but um, I guess what is UV? So, UV is a source of energy that comes from the sun, and UV radiation you can't see or feel. And so, it's really important, particularly why you need to know how and when to protect yourself. So particularly outdoor workers, it's important because I mentioned before about how many skin cancers associated and how you're so at risk. It's really important. Actually, a poll's just popped up now. If anyone would like to answer the polls in the chat. Um, so this is around sun protection policy. I'll give it a moment for people to answer this question if you know if your workplace has a sun protection policy. Another question, while I've got the UV radiation scale up, another poll will be asking as well if you know of what the UV needs to be before you use sun protection. As people often don't know, can be a bit of a myth. So, outdoor workers, it's really important to be using sun protection pretty much all year round. But for the general population, there's a poll that's just been popped in the chat of from what UV do we need to wear sun protection. So, as I said, UV radiation comes from the sun. Because now tanning beds are pretty much banned Australia wide, it's pretty much just from the sun is our sort of main source of, well, today I'm particularly talking about the main source from UV and solar exposure. And so to find out or how to find out where you can, when the UV, when you need to protect yourself, is from the SunSmart app. So we've got a free app that you can download. It's called the Global SunSmart app. You can download it onto your smartphone. You can also access it on general weather apps, usually on the Bureau of Meteorology as well, to find out when to use sun protection. I can see some people have answered the polls there. So the answer is actually from when the UV is 3 and above is when we need to use sun protection for the general population. So in Tasmania, that is from the beginning of September through to the end of April. For outdoor workers, as I said, though, we try and encourage sun protection year round. I mean, in general, in winter, you're probably wearing long clothing, pants, things like that, because it's cold. So you're probably going to be rugging up from that perspective as well. But it is important to use sun protection as much as possible just because of how much exposure there is. I can see that most people actually got that right. So that's great. So for some people, this might be a bit of a refresher. But yeah, so it's when the UV is 3 and above. So there are different factors that can affect UV. So time of day. So usually the UV is highest in the middle of the day. Time of year, like I said, it varies throughout Australia and different countries, but in Tasmania from the beginning of September through to the end of April in general is when we particularly want to use sun protection for the general population. Cloud cover, this can trick people quite a bit. Unless it's really heavy cloud cover, like a really dark, very cloudy day, then it can stop UV. But if it's a lightly overcast day, sometimes that can actually amplify UV. So it's important that even if it is lightly overcast, it's important to still use sun protection. Particularly for outdoor workers, reflectivity can be something to really think about the surfaces you're working around. So although we can get UV exposure directly from the sun. Also, we can get it indirectly. So it could reflect off different surfaces. For example, water. If you're working near water, it can reflect there. If there's any sort of hard, smooth surfaces, particularly something like concrete, because it is light coloured, and hard, smooth surfaces will reflect UV as well. So just I suppose just to think about, yeah, your surroundings where you're working as well, that it's not just UV direct from the sun, but indirectly as well. Proximity to the equator, so the closer you are to the equator, the higher UV as well, and altitude. So the higher you are, the higher that UV will be as well. This can also trick people too. If you've seen people who have been skiing, for example, and have these very funny goggle marks and has sunburn all around their face because UV at a higher altitude is quite high. So I just want to emphasize that UV and heat question. Um, and so this can trick people a lot, because UV and heat is something that actually isn't related. And so because you can't see or feel UV, you don't know when you might be affected by UV, whereas heat you can feel from the sun. Um, and so it's important to think about this because often at the beginning of September, when we need to use sun protection, like September and at the moment in October, I know particularly where I am here in Launceston, it is quite cold and windy and slightly overcast, but the UV is still high enough to damage your skin today. So UV and heat are not related. And this graph is a good example of that. So often, the warmest part of the day will be the afternoon. And you think of, particularly in summer, for example, the hottest part of the day might be 4, 5, even 6 o'clock at night, whereas the UV will most likely be below 3, then you're not needing sun protection. So just try and think about that when using sun protection, to not rely on thinking, oh, it feels warm outside, so I need to use protection. But actually, yeah, UV and heat aren't related. The other thing that will trick people is windburn isn't actually a thing. So people often talk about, oh, I've been windburnt, but actually might be a windy day, cool day, and people aren't realizing they're actually just getting sunburnt. So just to really emphasize the fact that UV and heat aren't related, and to really think about knowing when you use sun protection. So using things like the app, um, or looking online as to when the UV will be 3 and above. So employers are responsible for providing protective equipment, providing adequate information, training, education, supervision. So really putting different practices in place for employees is really important. And I suppose also probably creating a safe culture around you know, PPE gear and making people sure people are using it. But you also want to make sure that employees are also complying with these. So they're using the correct PPE gear, making sure that they are responsible for their own health as well. So it really is something that both employers and employees really need to take care of. So I mentioned before about a sun protection policy. So we can assist with writing a sun protection policy for a workplace. So this will include a bit of background around why it's important to have a policy in place, but also the different strategies that you can put in place to protect yourself and protect workers. So we can do this for free. We can send you a template sample policy that you can complete, or alternatively, if you've already got a sun protection policy in place and that you would like us to review it, we're more than happy to do that as well. My contact details will be on the end of the slide, but it is sunsmart at cancertas.org.au. You can send it to, but I will have a slide at the end that does have our prevention email on it as well. But just so you know, that is something that we provide, and it can really help. I suppose set the workplace up to make sure that there is the correct strategy in place and that you can always go back to. So I'd really encourage everyone to, if you're an employer or you work in the policy space in your workplace, that, yeah, please feel free to get in touch, and we're more than happy to develop a policy for you or review your policy. So I can see people on the slide have talked about have answered what are the 5 sun protection measures, which is great, and it looks like a lot of people have the correct answers. So if anyone hasn't now and would like to do that poll, what are the 5 sun protection measures? So there are 5 ways that you can protect yourself from UV. And so, it's sometimes not always possible to use all 5, but these are the 5, and to use basically as many as you can. So first of all, clothing. Clothing creates probably the best barrier for protecting your skin from UV. And this includes particularly thinking about things like having a collar on a shirt, long sleeves, long pants, essentially just trying to cover your skin as best as possible. And you can get clothing with what's called a UPF rating, so it's an ultraviolet protecting factor rating. You don't have to have clothes with that UPF rating. It just means that it's essentially tested against UV. But really, you just want to have cool, loose fitting clothing because also, you want to be comfortable and cool from the heat. But essentially, yeah, closely woven fabric, long sleeve as possible, is ideal. And the reason for the collar is that majority of skin cancers do occur on the face, head, neck, ears region. So where we can, we really want to essentially maximize UV protection in that area. So yeah, clothing is one. Hats. So wearing a hat that shades again your face, neck, ears. So something like a cap doesn't offer very good protection because it doesn't protect your ears and neck. So we recommend a broad brimmed or bucket or Legionnaire style hat. So generally workplaces probably tend to adapt more of a broad brimmed hat. Something else you can do as well is if you wear a hard hat in the workplace is you can get a Legionnaire attachment to really help try and cover your neck and ears area. So again, just trying to think of ways that you can really protect yourself in that area. The next one is sunscreen. So we recommend a SPF 50 plus sunscreen, and applying it ideally about 20 minutes before going outside so it's really got time to work. And the biggest thing that we find that people probably miss is not reapplying. So reapplying every 2 hours, particularly if it's hot, you're sweating, you're wiping yourself, then you could be wiping sunscreen off. So it's really important to continuously reapply sunscreen. We often hear that people who work outdoors will find that sunscreen can be a bit greasy or dirt will stick to your skin. So there are products out there called a dry touch sunscreen, for example, that if it's so then hopefully won't sort of dirt kind of stick to your skin. So it is quite good to use that also with trying to prevent sort of sweat dripping in your eyes. So dry touch is really good for that as well. And so we're aiming for a broad spectrum sunscreen that covers against UVA and UVB, which are 2 types of UV. So clothing, hats, sunscreen particularly, and then sunglasses. So you want to protect your eyes as much as possible. Cataracts, the main cause of cataracts is from UV. So we want to try and protect your eyes to try and avoid cataracts or any kind of damage to your eyes. So they're the different sun protections that you can wear. In terms of shade, particularly with outdoor workers, it can be tricky to try and find shade. So we suggest things like trying to take breaks in the shade if possible. Even trying to think of other strategies like if there's particular jobs you can do when the UV is a bit lower, or rotating people so that they're not so directly exposed to UV. Trying to think of ways to try and, I guess, minimize UV exposure where possible. But yeah, obviously shade can be a bit tricky to implement when you're working outdoors, but trying to take breaks in the shade and think of ways that you can just try and just break that. But yeah, clothing, sunscreen, hats and sunglasses, ideally if you can wear as much as possible, is great. So the last sort of section I wanted to talk about is obviously prevention is ideal, and we know that the majority of skin cancers can be prevented, but obviously we also want to check your skin to notice any signs of skin cancer. So we know that majority of skin cancers can be successfully treated if they're found early. So we just want you to really know the signs to look out for. So looking for any new spots on your skin or any spots that have changed in shape, size, or color. So they're the main things that you really want to look out for. And you know your skin best. So we really encourage people regularly checking your own skin. And if you notice anything unusual on your skin, like any of these signs or a new spot, then we recommend going to your GP to get it checked. Often if you have a regular GP you go to, often a GP in the practice will specialize in skin. There are also those skin cancer clinics around that you can go and see as well. So you can either go for just a spot check if you're worried about a particular spot, or you can get a full body check and get all of your skin checked. So it's really important to check all of your skin, not just areas exposed to the sun, because your skin is one big organ and skin cancer can occur on any part of your skin. So it's really important to be checking all of your skin. So things like under your armpits, even using a comb to go through your hair to feel any lumps or bumps in your hair, checking under your feet, just anywhere that you have skin, essentially, please try and check. So again, just want to emphasize any change in shape, size, or color of a spot, or the development of a new spot. If you notice that, then please go and get it checked. The one last thing, actually, just to end on, is that we can offer a discount on sunscreen. So if anyone purchases a bulk order of over $100, we can offer a 20% discount. So just to keep that in mind if anyone is interested in that as well. So that's the end of the presentation today. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We do have different resources available as well. So we have a specific outdoor worker booklet, and I might even pop that in the chat, actually, the link to the Skin Cancer and Outdoor Worker booklet. It's very comprehensive. It gives a lot more information than on the presentation today. We do also have brochures and postcards which have the sun protection measures and also how to find skin cancer early, like on the slide just previously. And then it has a QR code to more information. So we definitely can provide more information there. And here is my email and phone number and where you can find out more. So yeah, that's about it. And I will just pop the links in the chat too.
Thank you so much, Ella. That was a wonderful presentation. I think really valuable in terms of this being a reminder to stay sun smart at work and beyond, I think.
Thank you.
Um, we are open for questions. Please feel free to type in your questions in the chat box towards the right-hand side of your screen. While we wait for the questions to come through, Ella, I do have one of my own.
Yes, of
And
course.
I was wondering if are there any artificial UV sources that we might be exposing ourselves to, aside from obviously the tanning beds
Mm.
and the natural sun?
Yeah, so actually through welding as well, you can be exposed to UV through welding as well. So it's really important for PPE gear to be worn and really, yeah, specialized PPE gear for welding. So that's a sort of a separate thing again. But apart from other artificial sources, really the main is from tanning beds, which thank goodness are pretty much gone now because that was a big
Mhm.
cause of melanoma. But pretty much that is the main one, and then it's really is just solar UV or UV from the sun.
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's
I
okay.
think there's one that's just come through. It says, are insect traps a potential issue? I believe they use UV light.
Oh, that's a great question. I actually am not sure. I've never actually heard of UV light in insect traps, and that is a great question. But I'm very happy to find out and get back to Thomas if that is something you're interested in. Because yeah, that's fascinating. I've actually never heard of that before. So let me know if
Thank
you'd
you.
like me to find out, Thomas. I can get back to you.
Thank you, Ella. There has been another one that's popped through. It says, is there anything like duration in outdoor work to be careful of?
Yeah, and so why we recommend that outdoor workers predominantly use sun protection as much as possible all year round is because pretty much from anyone who works outdoors for more than an hour or two is when we say that they're at an increased risk. So from that perspective, we more than a couple of hours of working outdoors, then we recommend using sun protection. We can't sort of say with any certainty that if you work outdoors for X amount of hours on X amount of times per week, then you're a certain amount exposed to skin cancer. But we do know that if you work outdoors for more than a couple of hours, that it's really important, every day, that's why it's important to be using protection all year round. And it also depends on the UV levels. So particularly when the UV level is really high, then yes, as soon as you go outdoors, really you need sun protection. But yes, because if you are working outdoors for at least more than an hour, then it is important to be using sun protection regularly.
Yeah, no, 100%. Thank you, Ella. There is one about windburn. It says, what is windburn if it is not from the wind?
So windburn actually just isn't a thing at all. It's a complete myth. So because and if you think about it, there was actually a good video that I watched once that a different cancer council put out to try and spell the myth between it. That if you sat in front of a fan with wind in your face, you don't get burnt. It actually isn't wind at all. It's actually just UV. So you're actually just getting sunburnt from UV. But because people aren't aware that you can get sunburnt on a cool, cloudy, windy day, that it confuses people when they think it's windburn. See, actually, windburn isn't real, it's just sunburn.
There you go. Thank you for that. There has been one more question. It says, what is the difference between UVA and UVB, and how does this impact the need for sun protection on non-sunny days?
Yeah, great question. So there are a few different types of UV. So UVA generally causes more a different type of skin damage. So UVA is mostly responsible for things like wrinkling of the skin and premature aging of the skin. And UVB is generally the main cause of skin cancers. So when I was talking before about a sunscreen that is broad spectrum, so that covers both UVA and UVB. So it's really important that we look for, which majority of sunscreens should be, but make sure you're looking for a sunscreen that has the broad spectrum, which means that it will protect you against UVA and UVB.
Thank you again, Ella. There has been a few questions about just the UV light sources, one of which says, are manicure UV lamps dangerous, which is used in curing gel nails?
Yes, and I remember that actually coming up a couple of years ago, and that was something that people were talking about a fair bit. But the general consensus was that because of the exposure and how minimal it was, that generally no, that it wouldn't put people at risk. So I guess my only advice would be if you were worried, you could put sunscreen on your hands before doing it if you were quite concerned. But generally, the consensus was you weren't exposed enough, that there wouldn't be a strong UV to put anyone at risk. So no, it'd be fine.
Thank you. And just a similar question. It says, is fluorescent light a source of UV light as well?
I don't believe it is a source of UV. No.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Ella. I think that might be the end of all the questions that we had. Thank you guys for sending your questions through. We might just give it a moment for any last ones to pop through. But aside from that, it has been absolutely great to have you today, Ella. It has been quite insightful. And staying sun safe is just so important. So I hope we have a lot of takeaways to imply that in our work and beyond.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope that everyone got something out of today, whether it was just a refresher for you or you could learn something new. And I suppose really the key takeaways are, yeah, using the 5 sun protection measures as much as possible, knowing your skin so you can find any cancer early. And then if you need any more information, please don't hesitate to reach out on the contact details on the slide, and we'll try and help as best we can.
Lovely, thank you. I guess this brings us to the end. Just wanted to quickly mention that this event is run as part of the WorkSafe Tasmania month. So please head to worksafe.tas.gov.au/month to find out what other webinars and in-person sessions we have stored for the whole of the month. There will also be a survey link towards the end of the session, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you all for attending today's session. It's been great. Have a lovely day and stay safe. Thank you, Ella.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.